Delaware County Juvenile Detention Board of Managers. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we begin, I'd like to announce that we had an executive session yesterday to cover matters of public safety and real estate matters. Next would be our first round of public comment. So if there's anyone from the public who would like to address the board, please come to the podium. And this round would be for items that are specifically on the agenda for this afternoon. There'll be another round at the end that can be regarding anything juvenile detention related. Is there anyone from the public? Okay, hearing none. Next item for today is an approval of last month's minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion from Judge, second from Councilwoman Schaefer. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next for today is a report on monthly detained youth from the Juvenile Court and Probation Services.
Good afternoon, Kirsten Fitzsimmons from Juvenile Probation. We currently have 3 males in Morgantown, including 1 direct file, 2 females in Morgantown Detention Center, including 1 direct file, and 2 males in Bucks County. No direct files. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Fitzsimmons? Thank you. All right, a report from our Superintendent of Juvenile Justice Services, Mr. Rosari.
Good evening, Board. Today's report is going to consist of an update from our Department of Public Works. Today we have our Director of Public Works, Ms. Danielle Floyd.
So good afternoon. I wanted to provide the board with an update since the approval of our contract with Spiesel Architects, who was performing a feasibility study at the Lima campus where the existing JDC facility is now. So what I wanted to do was just walk through what their deliverables were included as part of their proposal, provide you with a status update, as well as share with you what those next steps are. So their first deliverable was to develop a program of requirements and determine what the future space and square footage needs would be based on that program. Superintendent Irizarry has provided us with Pennsylvania's 3800 regulations, which are the state's requirements as it relates to secure detention. That information has been provided to the architectural firm. Tomorrow, our next step is we're actually meeting to have our first discussion about program and operations with Superintendent Irizarry and his staff. Secondly, was to create a conceptual diagram in order of magnitude costs around 2 scenarios. The first would be renovation of the existing building, and the second would be select renovation and construction of a new addition, again at the Lima site. We provided all of the drawings that we have for the site to Spiesel Architects, and they completed their initial walkthrough of the JDC facility to survey existing conditions with their professionals included on their team on August 16th. They have shared their initial observations of the site, both the possibilities and the challenges that exist, and those have been presented to the design subcommittee members. Our next step with regards to this is contacting and working with the Recorder of Deeds, as we need to obtain property descriptions for the entire Lima campus, again, as we're looking at the entire, making sure we can confirm what the county owns, not just for the JDC site, but emergency services as well as for acres. We want to be sure we have all the necessary property descriptions, so we'll be working with the Recorder of Deeds to get that information. The third was to provide, the county would provide the services of a consultant for the project team with expertise in trauma-informed care. Superintendent Irizarry identified a leading expert in this area, Ms. Dana McKinney, She was introduced to members of our design subcommittee meeting at on August 10th, and we have finalized her scope of services, and we'll be executing her proposal to include her in our design and program conversations by the end of this week. Lastly, we engaged them to visit local juvenile detention centers. So far, they've completed visits to the Chester County Youth Center. That was on September 15th. This morning, they were at the Bucks County Youth Center, and next week, they are confirmed for visits to Montgomery County and Lancaster County's youth centers as well. The last thing that I'll share is in parallel to the work that Spiesel is doing, one of the recommendations from the design subcommittee was that we begin to answer the question with regards to scheduling and timing, specifically being able to communicate back to this board timing with regards to what may be required in order to get secure detention stood up, and that the schedule for the bigger project may not necessarily meet the immediate needs of the county. And so Superintendent Irizarry and I are going to be co-leading an effort with existing county departments to complete an analysis of this at the existing JDC, including the time required, what the staffing needs and costs would be in order to provide those answers to the board and also to county council. And that's the update that I have for the Board of Managers today.
Ms. Flood, regarding timing, can you just speak, I realize it's a draft timeline, but can you speak a bit to what the rough expectation is?
Sure. So Spiesel is expected to complete their feasibility study in November. And the timeline that has been drafted, those recommendations would come back to Superintendent Irizarry, to this board, as well as to County Council for consideration of the two options. Right now, that timeline assumes 3 months for that work to occur. So we would give them a decision by early February of next year. For presuming that we make a decision with regards to either renovating or designing, constructing some type of addition, right now that assumes about a year of design work based on the existing conditions of the facility and the walkthroughs that they have performed. And we're assuming a procurement period of about 4 months, again, depending on the size, scope, and budget of this of the project. And then I believe it was another year that was assumed for any type of construction activities at the site as well. So right now, long term, again, building on the vision that's been established with Superintendent Irizarry and his team, we'd be looking at 2025 for any type of renovated facility. I do want to preface that by it will also depend on any type of approvals that may be needed by Middletown Township, depending on how much land development or site disturbance that may be required for this as well, which is why we wanted to be sure, and it became a recommendation of the design subcommittee that we explore some short-term options that we could also present back to the board for consideration, parallel to that timeline as well.
Ms. Floyd, just for clarification, so with regard to approvals, permits, things of that sort, that's why that design period is so long. That includes the necessary approvals that are third-party in nature?
Yes, it does.
And I think also, just want to confirm and make clear, that also reflects the idea that the secure portion of the facility, to the extent it's possible to be complete with that before any larger visions of the non-secure part, that it would still be sort of done such that that could be open perhaps prior to the completion of the whole project.
Yes, that is correct.
I do have a question. I'm curious if the design subcommittee has introduced a name change, messaging, and branding of the facility with maybe a vision statement.
Yeah, so we talked about that at our last subcommittee. I think what we decided as a group was, again, we're going to be laying out hopefully an RFP that includes perspective of youth and families. They really want an opportunity to get feedback from young people and families in terms of what those names should be, and at that point, maybe 3 or 4 to the board, and we should select. We really want to be able to include community in that process. So that was the collective decision. Oh, no, from your advice, it was on the agenda, and we did talk about it,
Great.
sure.
Can I got a little confused there at the end of your presentation about the short-term, internally, we're putting a team together to look at short-term options. Do you mean using the building as it is while we're doing, like, so
Yes.
taking a wing of it or something like
Yes.
that and doing, oh, interesting.
Yes.
Okay. And that's happening now? The team is.
We're working, so we've identified the county departments that need to be engaged in that conversation, both from a programmatic, staffing, and operational perspective. So Dave and I we've shortlisted dates to be able to do that convening at the actual site, so that, one, I don't think everyone is familiar with the site or even knows what it looks like, so we
Right.
want to actually have that conversation there, but then identify what the needs are to be able to answer that question. What would it take? How much would it cost? What can be done
Right.
outside of a large-scale, huge overhaul of the site?
And how would the licensing work with that kind of short-term holdover approach?
Yeah, ultimately, again, so the license was submitted on August 12th. We would have to get the building license in its state. And again, in terms of what Ms. Floyd and I are working on, we don't have enough facts to know if that's doable, what the timeline associated with that is, but we essentially would have to go through the same process we've been going through since day one, is in terms of making sure that building is licensed through the state. They're going to have to conduct a site visit. We're going to have to run through what our program looks like. Even if it is a temporary solution, we have to have all that in place in terms of our policy procedures. A lot of that, because the current policy procedures are equipped for that building, there aren't much changes. Again, when I submitted to the state, there were only a few policy changes I implemented around social services, around the rights of LGBTQ youth in the center, things of that nature. So, again, we're exploring it, knowing that there could be a timeline associated with this that gives us some unknowns. We want to have somewhat of a temporary solution if possible.
No, look, I realize that the timeline laid out is a long one, and it's longer than I think any of us would like the answer to be. But I'd say I have personal skepticism about any thought that we can open something up in the interim there that also reflects what we would want it to look like, reflecting our values and what we want a juvenile facility to look like. So again, I realize that we want to move as quickly as possible, but I don't want to see us go halfway and open something up that flies in the face of what we're trying to accomplish here. I'd rather, when we talk about interim solutions, I'd rather they be looking at facilities that may or may not be in Delaware County, but are more aligned with what we'd want it to look like. Because in its current state, I don't support it.
Understood.
Thank you, Danielle. So again, I think this is our ninth meeting, and oftentimes we've asked for the perspective of our partners. At times, was specific to the district attorney's office. Again, we are lucky to welcome a new deputy who's going to oversee the juvenile division out of the district attorney's office. We wanted to have an opportunity to have her come here, introduce herself. Any questions we may have on behalf of the district attorney's office, please ask them now. So again, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the new ADA of the juvenile division here in Delaware County, Mrs. Kathleen McGee. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Katie McGee, you can call me Katie. I'm 2 days in, so I can answer any questions you may have for me, but I might not know the answer. But I'm looking forward to working with everyone, and hopefully we can get a detention center that will give justice to the juveniles as well as the victims in the community.
Do you happen to know
Professor?
the status of what the State Attorney General's office is going to do about these allegations of abuse of the juveniles?
I do not know, but I can
Nothing?
look into it. I don't know the status right now.
I would appreciate that, because it's been pretty much silence. No one knows, and I think that kind of hampers the board, because I think if we knew more, that would help us inform us, so that would be appreciated.
I will definitely look into it tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
So, yeah, actually, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your philosophy, and why would we have you stand up here and you give 20 seconds worth of, so tell us a little bit about yourself and where you
Okay.
came from
I'm a
and-
lifelong resident of Delaware County. I grew up in Springfield. I went to Cardinal O'Hara. I went to St. Joe's University. I went to Widener Law School, where I had a wonderful professor at that school, Judge Nichols. And I started at the district attorney's office in 2001 as an intern, hired as an attorney in 2004. I've been with the office since that time. I did have a 2-year break where I went private for a little bit, came back. I've been the trial team leader for probably every judge on the sitting bench. And just recently was promoted to deputy of the juvenile division. I was in juvenile court in 2004 and 5, I believe, with Ms. Poole from the public defender's office, so I'm lucky to have her there. I know Ms. DiMatteo from probation, so I'm working with them and getting my, trying to figure out what I'm doing, and thankfully they're there to support me and help me. I believe a detention center is needed in Delaware County, but I believe it can be better than what we had with the Lima Detention Center, so I'm looking forward to working with you.
Katie, we appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.
Moving on to some older business. Again, as you all know, I came before you all in March asking us to be able to move forward with accepting the grant from the Youth Advocate Programs. I was able to bring that forward to County Council, who approved us accepting that grant in July. Just wanted to give you all an update in terms of where we are with that piece. So again, it's YAP's intent to launch and start accepting referrals October 3rd of this year. Myself, Juvenile Probation, and Children, Youth, and Services have been meeting with YAP on a weekly basis, kind of planning what the launch looks like and making sure that we can equip them in terms of everything they need. They do have a physical site here in the county. They're going to be located 2619 West 9th Street in Chester, PA. I think as of now, they're meeting with a referral partner, so they're meeting with juvenile probation officers, informing them on what the program is and how they can utilize it. It's the same concept with CYS. So I'm willing to accept, hear any questions you all have regarding that. We think the project is moving forward, and again, this is a year initiative that is grant funded through YAP.
Can you remind us what the capacity is, how many referrals they're able to service?
Yep, so I think what we agreed upon was 32 young people for the year. Again, with that being said, I think collectively, Juvenile Probation, CYS, and myself, we talked about making sure that, because there is a small number of referrals, really choosing a subset of the highest risk need young people. So again, our partners at Juvenile Probation are going to be referring young people who score higher on their YLS assessment. CYS is there really from a prevention standpoint, so young people who are dependent, who are showing a lot of those early indicators of possibly going into to being delinquent, referring those young people. And again, I've been upfront in terms of my interest is, when we do not have a bed for a young person and they are released with a bracelet, making sure that we can kind of combine that with a program. If the young person has to be released a little bit earlier, making sure that they're continuously engaged through this program as well.
So I guess the program's success is really going to be largely dependent on buy-in from the courts and for probation, right? I mean,
Correct.
as we've talked about before, we can help set the menu,
Correct.
but we can't really decide what's selected off of the menu. Can you speak a little bit, and I don't want to put Ms. DiMatteo on the spot, but I'd just like to hear some thoughts on, where we stand in that regard.
Sure.
And confidence that it will be utilized. So I don't know if you'd like to
Danielle?
speak about it.
Yeah, I'm very confident in our probation department. Danielle, if you want to speak on.
Good evening, Danielle DiMatteo, the Director for Juvenile Court and Probation Services. As Dave said, we've been meeting with YAP weekly really to identify the paperwork and the information that they need to be able to be successful. They've located the building in Chester. They are set to meet with our staff directly to review the program over 2 in-person sessions. They are set to do the same with CYS. From a referral perspective, I guess, for juvenile probation, we have first looked at all of the youth who are currently involved in our system. I believe on the launch, they will only be able to address 8 to 15 youth maximum because of the number of advocates that they have on staff. I believe that they have 2 in the hiring phase and 1 or 2 that they are currently recruiting. So that'll be 8 to 10 for the 2 to start with, but then hopefully we'll graduate up. We're taking an inventory of all of the youth who are currently active based on age, status in the system, risk to reoffend, and services that they're receiving currently in the community. And we are working downward from the very high risk, and looking at very high risk. I will tell you that that population is generally in custody presently. So we're looking at our moderate to high risk offenders, and we're in 2 specific targeted areas presently. So that's our Upper Darby district and our Chester district to start with. If more advocates are available and they can support it, we would certainly expand. We're looking at youth who are expected to return home from placement over the next couple of months, and we'll target those to have a spot with YAP if it's appropriate. And then for kids that are coming in new to the system, again, being able to screen and identify them from the door. They are not an emergency-based services, so they are not available to us after hours or during non-traditional weekends and holidays. So they will not be called for like an emergency placement on a monitor or for services in the community as an alternative to detention during those hours. CYS is, I can speak briefly, but CYS is doing the same thing. They're looking at their intake services, their in-home services, and their placement services. Again, for kids who might be in the community in foster care who would benefit from this level of service, who may not be involved with the juvenile justice system at all, but to prevent them from being involved based on their behaviors and their risk assessment.
Could you talk to us about the offense categories that you're considering? So Dave mentioned highest risk of reoffending, but what are the offense categories that
we're not limited? They're not limited at this point. There is likely to be offenders who have been involved with firearms. I would anticipate if they're in the community, there might be offenses similar to robbery and burglary and of that nature as well. If that's, is that?
Yeah, that answers it. You also said you were going to use it as sort of a preventive tool. So does that mean that a young person could be, in lieu of placement, sent to YAP? Is that?
Yeah, it could be a step before placement.
Okay.
For us and for CYS. For CYS, it's a little bit different only because that they might be in the foster care system, but they might be exhibiting behaviors that are at risk for involvement in the juvenile justice system. So it would be, for them, it would be a prevention from being involved with the juvenile justice system. For us, might be an alternate to placement or out-of-home care.
And so the 32 kids a year, is that based on a model that has a kid involved an average of, I don't know, 6 months or 3, or like how do you arrive at the number 32?
That was based on the capacity that they thought that they would be able to do in the course of a year, knowing that some youth will come on and stay on, some youth might be there longer, some youth might be there less, and the number of advocates that they anticipated having, knowing that each advocate would be responsible for somewhere between 7 and 10 youth.
Great, and final question, and then I'll let others speak, I just don't want to lose it. So the number of advocates that they're hiring will determine whether or not 32 could turn into 50, could turn into 75, is that correct? Or is their capacity, given their resources, only that they would max out at 32?
I believe 32 was their cap based off of the first year grant. Obviously, when you're dealing with very high-risk young people, right, you want to keep caseloads as low as possible, right? So again, it's a combination of how many advocates. I think it was a total of 5 that the initiative is going to have. And I think they tried to keep, just a handful of young people each advocate will be working with just to really deliver that quality service.
Got it. And they talked about having advocates come from the community, that there were going to be.
Yes.
And that's still the
yes, and
plan.
they're actively recruiting advocates. I think initially they were not able to secure those locally. If I recall correctly, they were coming from other jurisdictions while they continue to recruit locally.
Philly, pretty much.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. Correct me if I'm wrong. While I know that they're not an emergency response team, my understanding was that they do offer non-traditional kind of working hours where if a family's in crisis, a youth is having a problem, they can reach out
Yes.
to provide that some more
Yes.
support, but not for the benefit of placing and
Not calling it.
understood.
Right. Yes, but they would respond to the family or to the
Understood.
youth that they're working with to be able to address those issues.
Thank you.
So I'm curious about, I'm sorry, Jim.
Go ahead.
I'm curious about the decision to have kids who are dependency kids, not delinquency kids. So they're not yet delinquent. They're not like crossover kids yet. So what was the thinking around having, because 32 doesn't sound like an awful lot of kids.
Yeah,
So I'm wondering why we would have that be a
It
dependency
isn't, but
option.
with the pilot, there's an opportunity to throw some things at the wall. And, obviously, we want to be able to service the young people who are in the delinquency system as well. But if there is an opportunity, maybe a very small number, to prevent young people from being a crossover youth for deeper deeper dive into the system, we want to be able to address that as well. So we don't have, and again, I think from day one, we talked about the value of data and be able to make some of those informed decisions. But again, we want to be able to, in a pilot, before we're paying for this thing, right, see what works, see what, where it best fits with young people here in this county. We didn't want to close our doors to any particular youth who is considered at risk. I think YAP has a broad kind of spectrum of what they consider at risk. I think I do as well, right? You may not be in the system, but you can be growing up in a single-parent household in a very tough neighborhood. You're essentially a risk as well. So we want to be able to address that, and that's kind of what we're attempting to do here.
Yeah,
with,
I guess my concern is like sort of the crossover potential for a young person who is purely on the dependency side of the system and has a behavioral issue, and because of their involvement with YAP and the sort of entanglement with juvenile probation, does that kid then pick up a delinquency charge by virtue of their involvement in YAP and being, I don't know, non-compliant around programming or some other?
Yeah, I'm not sure. If you refer from CYS, I'm not sure how much contact you'll have with a probation officer. I'll defer to Ms. DiMatteo. That's
So
a
there's no like
community-based.
reporting relationship?
No, and they're actually kept separate and apart from each other. So they would have to have an advocate or two advocates that are working with the dependent population, as well as one or two advocates working with the population that's involved with the juvenile justice system. And there is data to suggest that youth come into our system, they are already open and active with the dependency system. I have one just as I was leaving the office today, where there's a history that begins in their system, and that if there's an early intervention, the hope is that we could avoid them coming into our system at such a young age.
An observation and then a question. My observation is that based upon your experience and experience of your staff, that you have a sense of those children who are in the dependency system who might more likely than not end up in the juvenile system. Not saying that you're predicting it at all, but based upon your history and your experience with those children, you can say, as we look at child X, it's a possibility that they may end up in the juvenile system because of a lot of factors. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, there are certainly indicators that you can see in the dependency system.
Okay.
And I think when they do their assessments, they often recognize that there's an opportunity to intervene there to avoid that.
Okay. And then my question, I guess, is for you, Director. What about recruitment of people in the community to help with YAP? I assume you want people in the community help. I heard about that. Is there a specific way you want to recruit, or are you reaching out to certain organizations?
I think the service provider is kind of taking that bull by the horns. What I did when we received that job notification, my community contacts in the city of Chester, Rev was actually on the email as well. I just sent out the folks to say, hey, this is an organization that's going to be hiring within your area if you know any folks. I think Corey Long from Making a Change Foundation responded and said, we have some applicants. So I'm not sure how many of those folks actually were referred to the new director over at YAP. But yeah, I did my best outreach to the community and make sure that they're aware of what's happening.
But are you looking for people to volunteer with YAP, not to necessarily be paid for helping YAP?
Yeah, I mean, I would really defer to YAP leadership in terms of what that looks like.
All right.
When we have a center, for sure.
I mean, their recruitment is heavily based on full employment, part-time employment by the advocates.
And they have a location which they don't always have, right? So is it like an evening reporting center model? Is that what they're doing with the delinquency?
No, they're going to run the intervention groups and education curriculum out of the office once they're operating from a business model right now. They're going to be doing most of their work in the community at the point of launch. They're still waiting for some of the things that need to be done by the landlord as it applies to their lease, and then actively having youth in the building. They have brought on a psychologist who will provide the mental health counseling and also provide some of the cognitive curriculum.
So it sounds like we anticipate having referrals from probation and from CYS. Where does the judge fit in here? Is this a tool that the judge can use?
Yeah, he would, if a case is before the court, some of these cases may not be before the court yet, so the referral might be coming directly from probation at the time of intake. But if the case is in court and it's offered as a disposition alternative, then the court can hear from the parties and make a decision and certainly order that the child participate in the program.
Who would offer it as a disposition alternative?
Probation might for a court case, defense may,
Okay.
the Commonwealth.
District attorney as well, yeah.
Is it being thought of as a diversion alternative as well? I mean,
That's why we're saying that some of the referrals will likely be coming right from intake as a diversion, so they may not even enter the courtroom. That's if the intake conference is held, if it's an allegation and diversion is considered. Participation in the youth advocate program could be one of those dispositions. It would be an informal adjustment with supervision, but it would be a program that they would be participating in.
Any other questions or comments? Well, look, I mean, it's obviously an exciting diversionary opportunity we have, and Mr. Ozeri, you said earlier around data, I think what we really want to make sure, in addition to just what the inherent benefits are to those who go through the system, we do want to learn as much as we can from it, and to the extent that it's successful here. And I think there does need to be some patience with it. It's going to be new. I'm sure there's going to be elements of, making it work, specific to this county. But with that patience, I do hope that, this ends up being something that can be expanded here.
And I think that's certainly the stage that we set with YAP, is that we understand that it's under development in this area, although we know the work that they do in other areas because of the time that we spent outreaching those communities. So I think that they felt comfortable in that. They have, we've already started the preparation for the funding. We've included it in our needs-based request for this year to be able to sustain it, because I suspect that it will be successful in its own fashion, right? It's going to serve a population that needs to be served.
Is there an evaluation component built in, some sort of comparative data between young people participating in YAP and young people who go through, let's call it the traditional other pathway? So are we going to be looking at that at all? And
Well, there's outcome data collected for all youth, which
Right.
includes what programs they participate in, whether they're in the community, in detention, or in placement.
Well, I was thinking about comparative data, right? So if YAP is employing an approach that is especially successful, it would be, and also since they're a non-incarcerative alternative, I wondered if we had any plans to look at how YAP young people fare over time versus other young people, because it might be, it might inform us a little bit about, even the size of the detention center, since we now know it's not going to be built until 2025. It might give us some info that we don't currently have, so I wondered if we could
Well, I think, I mean,
look at that.
the 2025 days of draft, so let's,
I know,
I
it's
don't know
around
if
the
that's for
corner,
sure.
but yeah.
But again, I think, typically, that type of evaluation happens, after, 3 to 5 years of a program running. I think there is an opportunity to kind of compare it. I think what we built within the contract was a performance-based outcomes, right? So we talked about, X percentage of young people who are enrolled, not having to move on to the next step, which is placement or detention, wherever the case may be. So there's some measures in there just to kind of give some baseline emphasis to say, hey, this thing works. But again, that comparative study, It usually isn't done on an annual basis, but I think, if it's something that
You could do
continues.
a formative evaluation there, couldn't you?
And
Like sort of.
it sounded like YAP, when they presented a few times in different settings, actually indicated that that's how,
Part of their.
that is their approach, and they'll continue to be evaluating. It's an evidence-based
Right.
approach. They gave us information about numbers in other areas that they were able to see the effectiveness. And so I expect that they would be doing that as soon as they start to get kids from Delaware County.
Yeah, and could we get in our reports maybe distinguishing between YAP kids and other kids? Like, I'm wondering how we can, on an ongoing basis, just hear how they're doing.
Well, that's one of the things that I just don't want us to wait until it's too far along for us to understand what's happening, not to evaluate it good or bad, but just to monitor progress. So I was hopeful that maybe we could establish some regular updates, not reporting, but just regular updates, that recruitment is on pace, it's averaging this per month, those kinds of outputs that tell us that the program is performing in the direction we expected, and not to wait until the end of the year or closer to budget discussions to assess the value of that investment. So
I think we have what, a monthly and a quarterly report built in as well, so we're happy to share that. So, Danielle?
thank you.
Yes, so they're doing monthly youth reports that we will evaluate as part of our regular accounting for each individual youth, making sure that they're staying on task, making sure that they're meeting their goals, their case plan. And then quarterly, we're looking at some of the benchmarks that we've talked about, the recruiting, the availability of the advocates, the face-to-face contact with the advocates, the program material. Are they progressing through the various curriculums on pace? Are they achieving the goals set out in that pre and post test for each of the curriculums that they're using? The youth is likely to be there no less than 6 months in a successful connection. So thereafter, we would start to look at if they reoffended, or if they left the system and came back, or if they regressed post-involvement with the program, subsequently getting considered for detention or out-of-home placement. Again, that is one of the factors, along with additional police contact, arrest, and then being involved in an educational or employment program. Some of our youth are going to be on the older side coming out of school.
And I just want to underline lastly, there is a need for local folks to join the YAP program and become advocates. So since this is a public meeting, I want to make sure that the public knows there's a need there. So please reach out if you have people you think might be a good person to be an advocate. And thank you, Danielle, to your office for participating in this.
Thank you.
So again, just one more update. Again, in June of this year, I came before you all asking for your approval to move forward with advertising to bring an organization to the county to provide research, evaluation, technical assistance, amongst others, to really develop a county-wide strategy on to how to better service young people who are involved in the system. To refresh your memory around what the initiative was, again, it was bringing a third party down here to kind of outline a strategy in 3 steps. The first step was collecting youth data. Where are young people coming from? Where do they reside? What are the type of charges? What is the perspective of young people? Oftentimes we have community members here and say, we're building this without the perspective of young people. I really wanted to incorporate what that survey looked like. The next step, really giving us analysis of evidence-based programs and strategies that work in other jurisdictions that are similar to ours, to really help, fill in the service gaps that we may or may not have here. And then the third step, really developing what a roadmap looks like here in Delaware County as it relates to service delivery strategy and reducing delinquency. We were happy to bring that before council in July. It was approved to move forward. What that looked like, over 3,500, that was sent out to over 3,500 vendors, 29 vendors viewed it online, 27 downloaded the application. We were lucky to receive 2 submissions for those proposals. Next step, internally, we developed a selection panel. That panel consisted of a rep from juvenile probation, a rep from the district attorney's office, a rep from the public defender, a rep from the solicitor's office, our criminal justice, community justice manager, and myself. We reviewed these 2 applicants and we scored them based off of a scoring system that I was happy to send you all. So the provider that was chosen anonymously, and it was across the board, everybody kind of selected the same provider. Somewhere around 90 percentile of that 100% grading system was the Center for Children's Law and Policy. I was happy to send that to you all for your review. Again, coming before you all to receive a motion to move forward with bringing that before council and laying that initiative out. Happy to answer any questions about the proposal, about the CCLP in general, if you have any.
Just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm on the board of CCLP in Washington, D.C. Had no part in looking at, preparing, have nothing to do with the proposal, have not seen it or anything associated with this RFP until today.
You need a motion?
Please.
So moved.
Second.
Any further?
I am recusing myself, yes. Yep. Yes, and I'm recusing myself from voting.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments on the proposal? The folks had? All right, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I believe there's an abstention.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, board.
All right. Any new business for today from board members? All right, we're at the second rounds of public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the board? Please. There's a limit of 3 minutes for your comments, and just please give your name and address at the outset.
Hi, my name is Andy Matthews. I live at 111 Providence Road in Morton, PA. I was asked to share my experience as somebody who was detained as a juvenile. I was in custody of the state for approximately 100 hours, from the afternoon of Monday, March 19th, to the afternoon of Friday, March 23rd, 2001. I did commit a crime. And on Monday, April 30th, 2001, a deal was struck in this building that I would serve 16 hours of community service and take anger management and conflict resolution classes. And in the years that followed, I was plagued by this sense that the sky would fall at any minute. And from the time I was 14 to the time I was 27, I was suicidal every minute of every day. I survived 5 suicide attempts. I survived 10 years of alcoholism, at the height of which I consumed 3 gallons of vodka a week. I made it to 12-step recovery, and I haven't had a drink or a drug in 7 years, 2 months, and 6 days. And I took moral inventory, and I made amends, and 5 years later I wound up in couples therapy, and I found out I had PTSD. Took 2 years and $15,000 of therapy. And I am just now coming through to the other side. 21 years, 6 months, and a day from when I was arrested. There is something that happens to a person that is told, you can't be a part of us. There is something so egregious about you that you must be separated. I don't know to what extent that will affect the way this body goes about their business. But I was asked to share that by a member of the community, and as my grandfather would say, many are called, but few get up. And if at first you don't succeed, try the outfield.
Thank you, sir.
Colleen Kennedy, 8723 Westchester Pike in Upper Darby. I didn't really prepare remarks, but I just want to tell you a little bit about Andy, because I've known him for about 15 years. The last time that I came to this meeting, I talked to you about the couple of people that I know that went through this experience. Andy wasn't even on my radar, but I can tell you that Andy was one of my favorite people in high school, and I also knew the whole time that he was struggling. And there were countless other students that I went to school with that were struggling, and I could recognize it because I was struggling too. I didn't go through juvenile detention, but I dealt with trauma and abuse my entire childhood, and I also have CPTSD. And the message of that is that in this county and in counties across this country, we are not meeting the needs of kids and families. And this is a perfect opportunity for this county to meet that moment, and we are not meeting that moment. We have a proposal that won't be able, if we start it today, a proposal that won't be able to be enacted until 2025. So we have from now until 2025 to figure out what is possible here. We have diversionary programs that we just talked about earlier today. There's a lot of follow-up questions about how we're going to hold them accountable and make them effective. I don't see that same level of scrutiny about our juvenile detention center. I lamented at the last meeting about what some folks here consider to be trauma-informed care. Soft colors on the walls and plated glass so that it doesn't shatter. Well, my friends and I are currently organizing in this community about a 22-year-old who died in police custody. He made it out alive of his childhood, and then he died in police custody. So I just think that we need to have a wake-up call here. And my friend Andy shouldn't have to get up and tell that story for us to all have that presence of mind in this moment. This is an obvious moment. In this county, we don't have mental health care for insured adults. We definitely don't have it for kids. I experienced food insecurity growing up. My mom worked 4 jobs and we faced food insecurity. There are people facing housing insecurity. We could make a decision in the council, maybe not in this body, but we could decide that every young person gets a free SEPTA pass. Or we could decide that we're going to make sure that every single young person has access to at least weekly counseling. Or we can make sure that we're going to address truancy in our school districts. None of that is being accomplished here, and you're increasing the amount of people, young people, that you're going to put in juvenile detention, and we're still calling it juvenile detention. We're not taking accountability for the mistakes of adults, but we're still criminalizing kids. If you want to create an inpatient facility for kids that are in mental health crisis, let's do that. But as soon as you decide to have teachers and police officers and truancy officers and probation officers referring kids, all those same biases continue to exist. And I can't even begin to speak about what Andy went through, but I think we can all agree, I'll just wrap this up, this is my last sentence, that there are other kids that face even worse experiences than Andy. And look at how long it took for him to get the help that he needed, that he should have gotten when he was a kid. Thank you.
Peace, everybody. My name is Andre Sims. Address 708 Felton Avenue, Sharon Hill, PA. I'm an organizer for the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project. We run a participatory defense hub in Philadelphia. I work directly with young people who've been impacted by the criminal justice system, who've been impacted by crime. Also part of the Care Not Control Coalition, which is a statewide coalition that is organizing and advocating to end the practice of incarcerating young people in Pennsylvania, because it doesn't work. We have a problem. I'm also a person who, at the age of 17, spent 8 years in an adult facility. One of those facilities was George W. Hill, right here in Delaware County. I'm originally from Chester, Pennsylvania. Grew up there, was raised there. I now am working in Philadelphia, but the problems are the same throughout, and it's not necessarily the kids. That is but a symptom of a greater problem. The problem is the lack of resources. The problem is the lack of support. The problem is the miseducation. And I thank you for the two speakers before me, because y'all touched on so many things that I wish we spent this meeting talking about. You know, the fact that this building, this facility, this trauma-informed detention center, which is a bizarre description to me, but it's not going to be built until 2025. And here we have until now, from now until 2025, to work on solutions and to work within the community to prevent us from ever even needing a facility. At the last meeting, we ran the numbers, and it was said that we estimated that we might need 17 to 20 beds for this facility. That's 17 to 20 young people that we could be reaching out and giving that support to right now before they get there. And yet we're focusing on giving jobs so we could keep kids in cages. And I know y'all don't like that term, but as somebody who was in a cage, who was incarcerated, who had to go through that, had to suffer the traumas of Lyman, the traumas of George, the traumas of just incarceration in general. Like, that's very much what it is. I don't care what color the paint is on the walls or whether the glass can break or not. At the end of the day, locking kids up does not work. Our juvenile justice system is supposed to be different from the adult justice system in a way that we don't focus on punishment. We focus on rehabilitation. We focus on getting a kid prepared and restoring a kid to be in society in an effective, appropriate manner. Isolation doesn't do that. If you look at the studies, that's the worst possible thing you could do to a human being in general, let alone a young, malleable mind. And so I'm here today to repeat what the speaker said before me and urge everybody to sit there and think, like, we have power in this room to work on real solutions, next level solutions that could end this practice that we know doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. It hasn't worked historically. And we think that if we, change what we call it, if we change the way the facility looks, like, we might have a better crack at it. And I'm not at all, questioning or criticizing your ability, Mr. Superintendent. We've talked and spoken, and I'm, glad that you're involved in this, because I think you agree that it's important that we focus on the community. We focus on the resources that the young people need and not on locking them up. That is a very reactive approach.
Just finish up your remarks.
We could be proactive here. We could be proactive and focus on what children need, focus on what young people need, or we could be reactive and just wait for them to mess up and put them away and tell them, give them that message that society doesn't care. It's going to continue that cycle of crime, poverty, and incarceration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public?
Pastor Harrison, 919 Chester, Pennsylvania, Elsnore Place, Chester, Pennsylvania. Sorry for the raspiness of my voice. Kind of wanted to just come sit and listen to the progress that perhaps was being made from the last meeting. Basically, what I've heard was a lot of intervention and prevention in what you all are trying to accomplish, not just as sort of political term, lock them up in cage mentality. I haven't heard that here. I've heard us trying to be sort of a one-stop shop, trying to have as many resources as possible to meet a holistic redevelopment of our children. At the same time, keep in mind, this is the advisory board of the Juvenile Detention Center. You have a mandate, a state policy that you got to meet. You got laws you got to, adhere to. And so you keep hearing, we don't need. Well, I don't just come as a pastor, but I come as a parent. Now I come as a parent, maybe I'm the parent of, a young man said, hey, some years ago he committed a crime, and I'm thank God that he's getting, the treatment for emotional stability that the lockup did. And the other young man said he did some time, but I'm coming from the parent who was providing the resources, not bad adults. I was giving my child a shelter, a good place to stay. I adopted my sons. I gave them resources. In most of the agencies that are on this board that deal with the kids, I'm on the phone trying to get help. Law enforcement, CYS, the whole nine. Mental health, they talk about mental health. We had wraparound services. We spared no expense. And repeatedly, after violation after violation after violation, keep committing crimes. It's not my desire that you just be locked up, but something has to happen. And we have one child now that's getting treatment. He's not in a juvenile detention facility. He's one step before. And he's making some progress. The other son is still out on a bench warrant. He robbed me. He's on the street. I know there's like police officers' presence on this board with a loaded shotgun. The video of him stealing and breaking in a home, stealing $3,000 worth of merchandise, and in our home, and while I'm disabled, blind, have illnesses, sleep apnea, came into the house with the loaded shotgun, robbed us, called the police, put a missing police report. I'm out of time, but I'm here to just simply say, you got one side saying trauma, I'm traumatized. Now here's an answer. We keep saying what we need to do. When you pick them up with a bench warrant and you don't have a bed for them, and I can't see where she is, but normally we work together trying to find a placement, call that young lady, call that guy, and call that guy, and you take them to their house. They seem to know what to do with them. Give it to them. And I still care. I'm still going to financially be there. I'm going to come to court. I'm going to go to the counseling. But they do need to be in some type of structured environment so they can get rehabbed. They can get the help they need. Just being out on the street robbing people, the whole neighborhood wants to kill them, and they don't need to be locked up. Sometimes that's the safest place for them.
If you just wrap up your remarks.
So I'm urgent. I mean, I know it's public comment, so they can get to come up here with that. I'm going to bring my violin, because enough is enough. Got a 17-year-old who's robbing the community with a loaded shotgun. A loaded shotgun. The police got the videos. Everybody knows nothing's being happened. And we see them meandering through the community. Come on now.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments for today? Hearing none. Board member comments. Anything last from board members?
I just wanted to say that I plan to try to get to the board meetings of the other counties. With our director, I went to see the facilities. Now I think I need to go to the board meetings to see how their meetings are run, to see what they're doing, so we get a better sense of where we're going, because I think this board is clearly going in the right direction with our director and also with the help of the public comments. But I think I need to make sure I try to attend the board meetings of these other counties so we can see what they're doing. That's all I have.
So I try not to say much, but I just want to say this. To all of those that are here, the more information that you can bring us, you said you had an art program, and I know you work with David and things like that, but for those who have programs and have information, we are open. Certainly David is to hear and to look at as many best practices across the board, whether it is detention or whether it is intervention, whether it is trauma, whether it is psychological, whatever. We don't know, we don't have all the answers, but we're here to listen and we're here to make decisions. And so if you have insight, if you have programs that have worked, please don't just come and tell us the problem. Bring us some solutions. Bring us some things that we can say, in addition to all the other things that we're looking at, best practices from around the country, because we're looking around the country. In addition to that, these are things that work in our communities. And let us take and see how we can add those to everything that we're trying to do. At the end of the day, we don't want, and this is just me, I'm not speaking on behalf of the board, this is just me. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that every child has everything they need to have a whole life and to be prosperous. Whatever that means, whether it means that they have intervention, or it means that they have gotten another path. Whatever that is, we want to make sure that they have it because they deserve it. But again, we only know what we know, and your help will make all the difference in the world. So when you come next month, please come with as many solutions, or call David in advance of next month with as many solutions as possible that we can add to everything else that we're doing to get to where we need to get to in a timely fashion. I just needed to say that.
Thank you, Reverend.
I want to just say, Mr. Irizarry has a really hard job. This board and our council hired Mr. Irizarry to change a culture and to take a problem that's faced by the entire country, reinvent how we're going to face this problem, in face of a system that's entrenched and has been entrenched for 150 years. I encourage anyone who doubts his approach and his view of treating our children holistically and making sure that this system recognizes the things that we hear about every week or every meeting, have a conversation with him. We didn't just pick him off the street. He really has an understanding and a passion for crafting a system that is going to treat our children like children who need help, while adhering to the state's mandates of having a place to house our children who need the help. So I want to recognize that we all want the same thing here. There's nobody on this board or on council who wants to recreate what was in place and to lock up kids who are problematic. That's not going to happen. But it's a really difficult thing to take on a culture, change it, and put something new in that's not tried and true. So I want to say thank you to Mr. Irizarry. We all understand what we have asked of you, and we are trying to be patient.
Thank you.
Any other board comments for today?
I have a comment. I just want to say I hope that to hear more from the sub-design committee and more about the meetings that are planned, because to me, 2025 seems unacceptable. I understand that we're trying to do a lot here, but that's 3 years away, and I just don't know how this county, just speaking as one member of the board, one resident, one taxpayer, I can't even get past that date. But thank you.
I think collectively, we were all, again, it's a tentative timeline. I think we're all taken back by it. But, I'll work with stakeholders, our local leaders, and make sure if there is a temporary solution, we'll jump on top of it to ensure public safety here.
Anything else for today? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Chief.
Good job. Keep up the good work.